Well, hey guys, welcome back to the Grossmans Country Life. Tina and I recently were able to pick up some new living room furniture, a couple of recliners and a new couch over here, which made my wife very happy, but it also amplified what was already an embarrassing situation in here. And that's this TV tray turned end table that we've been collecting junk on. My wife basically questioned my woodworking ability, that she would have to live with this when I had a perfectly good shop up there to work in. So I'm going to try to make her happy today. We're going to build her an end table that has a soft close sliding drawer to keep some of the loose stuff in. It's going to have a tray or a shelf on the bottom for her to set her makeup bag, her Bible, that kind of stuff on, keep it out of the way. And it's going to have a power supply on the back of it where she can plug in the lamp, her coffee warmer. It'll have USB ports for our cell phone chargers, that kind of thing, to just try to get this area a lot more organized and a lot more fitting for the rest of our living room and our furniture. And we're going to do that. I don't have any plans. We're just going to wing this. I do have this picture that I pulled off the internet to basically kind of guide me with what I wanted it to look like. And we're going to do it all with scrap lumber that I have up there in the shop for the most part. I might have to buy a 2x4 or two. But most of it's just going to be scrap. However, if you want to build one of these, it's all just going to be 1x and 2x construction lumber, stuff you can buy cheap at the big box store, and you'll be able to build one of these yourself. So let's get started. Like most projects, this one started over at the miter saw. I cut down the legs and the bottom stiles for the end table using some leftover 2x4s that I had from my chicken coop build. Once I had them at the correct length, I headed over to the table saw to rip the legs down to 1.5 by 1.5 inches so they'd have nice crisp edges, just to get rid of those rounded 2x4 edges. And my two side stiles I cut down to 1 inch by 1.5 inches. And you'll see how those fit into the picture here shortly. I then headed over to the planer. And this isn't 100% necessary, but these boards were a little rough on the face sides, and I just wanted to skim just enough off of them for a good smooth surface, even though I was going to end up distressing the whole thing in the end. With the legs ready, I took an old 1x10 pine board that I'd pulled out of my basement. It had been previously used for shelving for who knows how long, but I took those over to the miter saw and cut out what would be the side panels for my end table. Then it was back over to the table saw to rip them down to the desired height. In order to attach these sides to the legs, I needed to add pocket holes to each end. So I headed over to the V4 pocket hole jig that I just picked up here recently and put 3 pocket holes in each end. And if you're looking for a decent jig that's all metal and a little more affordable than a Craig, check out the V4 model. I'll put a link in the description below if you're interested in checking that out. But I've been really happy with mine in the couple months that I've had it. Now with the pocket holes in place, it was time to mount the sides to the legs. And since these were 3/4 inch boards, mounting onto 1.5 inch legs, or 1 3/8 by the time I planed them down, I used a couple of clamps just to make sure that those sides stayed positioned where I wanted them, which was flush. I wanted the back of those sides to be flush with the inside of the legs. Now I needed to drill pocket holes in the ends of my stiles. And these stiles aren't 100% necessary, but I just think it beefs it up a little and gives it a nicer kind of farmhouse style look when you add these to the bottom of those sideboards. And with the pocket holes in place, again, I mounted these along the bottom of the sideboards, screwing them into the legs on each side with the pocket hole screws, and then gluing them to the bottom of the sideboards. And I don't know, in hindsight, maybe I should have put pocket holes in the bottom of those sideboards as well to tie it together, give it a little stronger tie. But hopefully between the pocket hole screws on the ends and the glue all along the top of those stiles, it'll all hold together. Then it was time to cut the front and back stiles. And of course, like everything else, it started with cutting them to length on the miter saw and then moving over to the table saw to rip them down to the correct thickness, which in this case was 1 inch, just like I did the side stiles. And these also receive pocket holes on each end, so they could be attached to the legs. Now, as I attach these front and rear stiles to the legs on each side of the end table, this is where the first hiccup in the build comes along. Well, all right, that was a bit of a fail. I got this thing together using these short pieces. The idea, my wife wants them narrow, but honestly, I mean, that's not too narrow, but the issues it was causing me to get those pocket screws in there, I was getting a gap. I just didn't like it. So what I'm going to do to just simplify things on myself is I'm going to go a little longer, a little wider on this thing. These are 7 3/4. I may go, I don't know, 10. That's going to, yeah, 10. The original plans called for it to be like 14 inches wide, and I was just trying to get it down to about 12. But we could go 9 3/4, and that would get it back to kind of the original plan. So I think that's what we're going to do. I wasn't happy with it. I was going to leave a gap where the legs met these boards. Of course, one of them would be in the back. Hardly anybody'd ever see it. But the other one was in the front, and I would see it. They probably still wouldn't see it, but I would, and it would drive me absolutely nuts. So, yeah, we're gonna regroup here. No big deal. Didn't get past the point of no return or anything. Just got to cut us a couple longer braces there, and we'll do this thing upright, hopefully. All right, so I cut a couple of longer front and rear stiles, drilled pocket holes in each end of them, just like I did the others, and then using some wood glue and pocket hole screws, I used those stiles to connect the two end table sides together at the front and back. Then it was over to the miter saw to cut the back panel of the end table. And of course I ripped it down to the necessary height, same as the sides. Added pocket hole screws to the sides and the bottom, and attached it to the rear legs and that rear stile of the end table. Next, I needed some lower rails for the end table so I could mount a series of slats across the bottom of the end table for a shelf that would give my wife a place to put her books, her Bible, her makeup bag, or anything else that she wanted quick or daily access to. And just like the upper stiles, I made these 1 inch thick and about 1.5 inches tall, and they also got attached using pocket hole screws on the insides of the rails. That way no one would ever see them once those slats were in place. And speaking of slats, now was as good a time as any to get those together. So I headed over to the table saw and ripped down some more of those 1x boards, this time to 2 inches wide. I thought that gave it a good look overall and kept the math pretty easy for me. And once I had several of those ripped down, I did a quick dry fit on the bottom of the end table just to make sure that I had enough slats. And then I headed over to the bandsaw to cut the corners of those end slats so they fit around the legs of the table. And that one worked out perfect. Now that I had those ready for finishing here shortly, it's time to figure out the drawer. Before we started cutting boards though, I needed to get a few measurements. The width of the drawer is really important because it needs to be exactly 1 inch less than the width of the opening in order for the drawer slides to fit and work properly. Height is a little more flexible. Also didn't want to go too deep on the drawer though, because I planned on installing a power port in the back of that end table for plugging in a lamp or being able to charge our cell phones or anything we needed to plug in like that. Once I had my measurements, it was over to the miter saw to cut the front, back, and sides of the drawer. Then I ripped them down to what I thought was a good height. More on that here in just a minute though. And I installed pocket holes in each side of the front and back panels to hold these all together. Then it was on to assembly. And this was pretty straightforward, just using wood glue and pocket hole screws again in that front and back panel. Once assembled, I hit it with the orbital sander and then headed over to the end table to test the fit. I quickly noticed two things. One, I needed a support board at the top of the end table, both to support the sides at the top and to give the lid something to mount on in the front. And I also realized at this point that my drawer was a little too tall. It may have worked, but it was closer than I wanted it to be. So I decided to take out the top pocket hole screws from the front and back and use the table saw to rip it down about an inch shorter all the way around. Perfect. Then the one final piece of the drawer was the door. And I cut it out about a 1/4 inch narrower and shorter than the actual opening, so it would have good clearance on the top, bottom, and both sides of the end table. And then I used a round over bit in my little Ryobi handheld router to give it some shape. With that done, it was on to the painting phase, which is always my least favorite part of the build. Actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because before I can start the painting process, there's one more thing I need to do, and that's cut out a hole in the back of the end table for the power port that I'm installing. I picked this thing up from Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description for anybody who's interested. But it's just a box with 2 regular power receptacles, along with a few USB ports, a couple of regular USBs, and a couple of USB-C ports for charging cell phones and other electronic devices. I know we'd have a lamp on the table, and my wife also uses a small coffee cup warmer in the morning, and we're always needing places to charge our phones, so I figured those USB-C ports would definitely come in handy. Once I had that marked, cut, and fitted, now we can finally move on to the painting process. Now, the painting process took way longer than I had anticipated, and I'll get into why in just a minute, but the initial idea was a distressed aqua or seafoam green farmhouse look for the table. So I started with a black base coat, and while I didn't show it here, I did hit the whole thing with 120 grit sandpaper before I started this process. Once I got the black coat on, I decided to try to save a little money by using some aqua paint that I had left over from a bathroom a few years before. And the paint still looked good and seemed to be pretty close to what we had envisioned. So I went ahead and hand painted the end table that aqua color. And by the time I was done, I realized it was a little brighter than I had planned. Hopefully the distressing process will tone that way down. So to distress it, I used some 120 and 220 grit sandpaper and hit the edges and just random spots to give it that worn, distressed look. And it actually turned out pretty good. I liked how it looked by the time I had sanded it down. But then I decided to try a tip that I actually got from ChatGPT. and I wiped some dark stain on the end table and then quickly wiped it right back off. And just as the chat GPT had said, it did give it a dingier, more distressed look. In fact, it looked pretty good, but my wife and I quickly decided it really didn't fit with our living room like I'd hoped. So it was back to the drawing board. And this time we decided to match the end table to our buffet table that we already had in the living room there by going with a distressed antique white. So once again, I hit the end table with another sanding to prep it for paint. Went back through all the steps of painting and distressing that antique white paint. And in the end, I'm glad we made the change. The white ended up fitting in with our decor way better. And I think it looks good. We're very happy with it. So with that nonsense out of the way, it was time to start putting the finishing touches on this thing. First up were the slats for the bottom shelf. Now we cut these out earlier, but now I went ahead and hit them with some 120 grit sandpaper, and then I stained them using some dark walnut stain that I already had on hand. Man, I always like the look of a dark walnut top on a white piece of furniture. Once the stain had dried good, it was time to install the slats on the end table. So I laid them out, then spaced them as evenly as possible. I mean, I just eyeballed them. I didn't go through the trouble of using a set spacer, but I got them where I thought they looked good. I mean, this is a rustic end table. And then I went down the line one by one, gluing and nailing them in place. And with those in place, I could finally put a clear coat on the end table itself, along with the drawer and the drawer door. We'll get to the top here shortly. Once I had applied a few coats of clear and let it dry, it was time to get the drawer mounted. I started by marking exactly where the drawer door would sit, so I knew where the front edge of my drawer slides needed to stop. Then after marking where I wanted the slides vertically, I used a scrap piece of wood and some clamps as a guide to sit my slide on while I attached it to the inside of the end table. And once that was mounted, I did the same thing over on the other side. Next, I put the drawer in and adjusted where it needed to be and made a couple of marks on the front so I knew where to mount those slides on the drawer itself. And it was a tight enough fit that I was then able to ease the drawer out with the slides, make sure it lined up with my marks still, and then attached it with the screws they gave me. Then it was on to the drawer door. I marked the center of the board, both vertically and horizontally, and drilled a hole for the drawer pull that I would install here in just a little bit. Then using a couple of pieces of cardboard as spacers, I set the door up in the drawer opening and got it all lined up. Then I attached the door to the drawer by installing a screw through the drawer pull hole. Now this was just a temporary measure until I could get a couple of screws in from the back or from the inside of the drawer up into that door. Once the door was attached, I finished drilling the hole for the drawer pull and installed that on the drawer. Now let's get this power supply installed. Fortunately, this thing I already had it fitted. All I had to do was put it in place and tighten down the 2 screws that came with it. Now the last kind of big thing that I had to do on this build was get that lid built and installed. And once again, just like the slats, I used some old 1x material that had been used as shelving in my basement. And I cut the board a little long so I could square it later. And then I ripped 5 2 3/4 inch strips that would serve as my top. I then ran those through the planer to clean them up a little bit and assembled them with glue and clamps. And man, that old pine was so pretty. I almost hated to stain it, but I had to stick to the plan. So once the glue was dried, I scraped off the excess with a chisel, squared the whole thing up on the miter saw, hit it with some 120 grit sandpaper, and then I stained it using that same dark walnut stain that I used on the slats. Then to finish it off, just like the rest of the end table, I sprayed a few coats of clear on it using that Rust-Oleum satin clear coat. And now we're ready to put the finishing touches on this thing. All right, we're down to the wire on this thing, and all that's left is getting some protective feet mounted on the ends of the legs, just to keep it from marring the floor. Then it was time to set the lid in place, get it all lined up so I had an even amount of overhang all the way around, and then attach it to the frame of the end table using some metal L brackets and the 2 cross members that I had installed on the inside top of that drawer area. And with the lid in place, all that was left to do was slide in that drawer and call this one done. Well guys, there you have it. I think we can officially retire the TV tray now. Despite some hiccups along the way, this was a really fun build, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's not perfect, but I'm happy with it, and most importantly, my wife is happy with it. And in the end, that's all that really matters. But it's really turned into a nice functional piece for us now. It's got the drawer that we can keep things in. It's got the bottom shelf there where she can keep her Bible and her makeup bag and that kind of stuff. And it's got power in the back where you can plug in the lamp, the coffee warmer, cell phone chargers, that kind of thing, to really make it a nice functional piece. I'm sure now I'm probably going to be making more things here for the house. But hey, if you enjoy projects like this, I hope you'll take time to hit that subscribe button, hit that little notification bell. There'll be a lot more, not only woodworking projects, interior projects, and a lot of stuff out on the property as well. But guys, as always, I will see you on the next video.